It's just unfair. It's just unfair. As children, we learn very quickly to be able to say no to things. As teenagers, we learn to question whether things are fair. Sometimes teenagers have a sense of justice. And I remember as myself, I would often question my parents when they said no or they wouldn't give to me what they'd given to one of my other siblings. I would say it's just not fair. And I'm sure at times we've felt we might have even said the same thing ourselves to our own parents. I know even as adults, sometimes there is a sense of justice that comes in to say, well, everything should be split equally. And I've sometimes, unfortunately, met with some families who've decided to dispute the estates of their deceased parents because one sibling got more than another. And they said, it's not fair that they get more than me, so we're going to go to court and fight them over it. I'm sure you've heard some stories like this happening. Or someone's not got as much as they wanted, they're going to fight for it. I should be equally treated. And today we have this interesting gospel of Jesus where he has this parable, this story about a landowner and workers. And the landowner pays everyone the exact same amount at the end of the day. And those who came first had worked the whole day long, they felt gypped. They'd worked about 12 hours, we're told, out in the vineyard, working hard for 12 hours, and they get paid exactly the same as those who showed up and worked less than 1 hour. And you sort of feel their grief. I can feel that grief and pain that they might have had as well. It doesn't seem fair. And at times we could probably feel the same as well. Someone who comes to faith 5 minutes or an hour before they die, they get welcomed into God's kingdom the same as those who were baptised as little babies and have struggled to live the Christian life every single day for 80 or 100 years. Is that fair that we both get to enter into heaven? Is that the same? Should we be rewarded in the same way? Well, ultimately, heaven, you could say, is a beautiful place, but it's not a reward for our efforts. It's a gift that God gives, and God gives it generously. And we should, in life, not just think about what's fair. The question, I think, is how can we be generous? And how can we delight in the generosity of others? I think that's part of what this gospel is getting at. Are we generous? And are we willing to accept the generosity of others and allow for the generosity of others? Or do we want to mandate fairness or what we think is fair? There's another element to this parable that I think is important for us to think about as well. Is the landowner goes out, he goes into the marketplace and hires everyone who was available who showed up to work at the beginning of the day. Hires them all. Then he comes back 3 hours later and he finds more who weren't there at the beginning of the day looking to work, but convinced them it was a good thing to work. Comes back 6 hours later, 9 hours later, and finding more people who hadn't showed up or hadn't even thought to work, and was convincing them of the dignity and the importance of contributing, of work. And he comes there, and it's interesting, he has those who've been doing, I don't know what they were doing for 11 hours of the day, but he comes there and he says, what have you been doing, standing here around doing, what have you been doing all day long? And he says, go to the vineyard and work. And there is an importance for all of us to contribute. All of us are called not to sit around and to be idle. Let's not waste our days. Every day we should be filling it with good things. Sometimes people say to me, oh, you seem to be going from thing to thing. You're doing lots of stuff. You seem very busy. I don't think I'm busy. And nobody thinks I'm busy. I like to think I'm doing things every hour of the day. And I'm sure all of us are doing things, and we're called to be productive. We shouldn't be wasting our time. And I think, unfortunately, some of those who are called to the vineyard at that very last hour, it looks like, from what the parable's telling us, they'd wasted the day. They had every opportunity. They could have shown up for work at the first hour, or the third, the sixth, the ninth. They didn't show up for work at all. They had wasted the day. But they're still rewarded by God, who is generous. So I think there's two elements to the gospel tonight for us to take away. First of all, let's be generous. Let's not always think that everything should be equal and completely fair. I only worked 1 hour, or he worked 10 hours. We should get paid differently. God is generous. This is not primarily about workplace relations. This is about generosity. So let's be generous in our own lives, generous with others, generous with our prayer. But let's also be productive. Let's not sit around and do nothing, waiting for something to happen. Let's be active, not busy, but active in the service of God. Active in prayer, active in encouragement, active in encouraging others to live that life and helping others to live the life of love in the world today. It's a challenging vineyard, it's a challenging world, it's a challenging marketplace. Jesus writes about that, talks about this in this parable today. We hear it in the gospel. Let's be people who are generous, but let's be also people who are active, not just for 1 hour, but active for the whole day.